Welcome to Harmonious Clan's live parenting coaching replay. We do our live coaching every Friday at 9:30 a.m. Pacific, 11:30 a.m. Central, and 12:30 p.m. Eastern on Facebook Live. Luiza will answer your questions, help you walk through your struggles, and provide you with strategies you can apply now to bring out the gem that is your child from that diamond in the rough.
Hi, my name is Luiza Kasha. I'm the author of Outcast to Outstanding, the practical guide to understanding and addressing the drivers of your child's behavior. I'm here every Friday at 10:30 Mountain Time to share my strategies and do a little bit of coaching on parenting issues and also parenting of special needs children and answer any of your questions. I'm here to create a supportive environment so everybody can have a place to go to ask questions and get some strategies and not feel so alone. Today, I want to talk to you about ADHD, the diagnosis, and medication and some other med-free ways to live with it, to manage it. I've been getting a lot of questions about ADHD and their children either having been diagnosed or not, or they're having mixed messages and mixed signals about whether or not their child really have it. It seems that it's a topic that many parents feel very confused about. They usually see that their children maybe have some traits or the teachers are seeing something, so then they go to the doctors and the doctors will give a diagnosis and they may go to a different doctor and they may not. And so leaving you kind of in a limbo, and then you have certain doctors that have already given you medication, and then you're going back to the teacher and it seems like you're not sure if you should be using the medication, you're not sure if your child really has it. It just seems to be such a great area. So I want to spend some time to address that concern, and I want to spend some time to talk to you a little bit more about the topic. So if you are one of those parents that get into the limbo of, okay, my child has ADHD, maybe not, or maybe they do, and what do I do? Want to start off by talking about the diagnosis. The diagnosis of ADHD is very, very subjective, and it's very behavior based. So you may have a teacher that just has seen so many students over the years and they can pinpoint out which students are definitely not acting like your average students. And they can probably say, okay, he probably has ADHD, something like that. And when you go to the doctors, it's a lot of questions and it's a lot of assessment based on how the child behaves. There's not a black or white blood test that you can take to get a clear answer on whether or not my child has it, unfortunately. So many times things do get misdiagnosed, and many times when your child is showing the traits of ADHD, you get a diagnosis. And I think my point here is to me personally, I don't think it really matters what label you put on the child. I think the only time when it really matters on, okay, does he have a diagnosis or not, is when it comes down to accommodations and services that your child may be entitled to due to the diagnosis. And those are the times when, okay, it's really cut and dry, either he has it or he doesn't. And those are the times, I mean, if you want to be able to access accommodations and those things, then it becomes important that it's documented. And I think as far as your everyday living, as a parent, you are better off just understanding the drivers of what's going on under the child. And I think that's a much better way to manage the day-to-day living of a child's life. For example, even if you do not use medication, there's still many other ways you can manage the ADHD behavior-wise and just your day-to-day living. So on the diagnosis, I think many times you look at the traits, right? The child with ADHD, they tend to always lack executive functioning skills. So those are the skills to initiate a task, to start a task, and then to sustain in a task, to complete a task, to shift from task to task, to organize their thoughts, to organize and plan out their next steps. All of those are executive functioning skills that is typically lacking in a child or adult with ADHD. However, I don't think it's that clear that if your child doesn't have those skills, he for sure has ADHD, which is why I feel iffy about the diagnosis. And I've come to the conclusion where, either has it or not. If we need the paper, okay, let's have the paper. But the rest of the time, let's just really look at the child and look at what's underneath, because there are skills that we can fill in. For example, all of the executive management skills, which make that they lack, which makes it very, very difficult to live your day-to-day life. It's like they wake up and then you're trying to get out the door, trying to go to school, and they don't have their stuff together. They're not packed. They forgot this, forgot that. All of those traits are actually manageable, and the skills are also teachable. So you can go either way. You can decide, okay, it's just really hard. We're going to try some medication. If that's what you want to choose, I think that's okay. Or if you want to try some other ways to manage, I wanted to let you know that the options are there to manage without medication in terms of looking under the waterline for what skills are missing. So I want to talk about a little bit about the tip of the iceberg, right? So the tip of the iceberg is your behavior. When you look at it, okay, so the child can't get it together. They can't get out the door in the morning. They can't get packed. They don't remember what they were supposed to do, what they were supposed to bring. They're off focus. They're off tangent. They can't focus on the task. They can't listen. They can't complete the task. All of those are behaviors. And I think when you look at it, you want to look what's under the waterline. So medication does not really, it helps you manage it on a daily basis, but it doesn't build up the skills that a child needs growing into adulthood. So I like to use it as a patch. If you're really having a rough time and you really think you can benefit from it, I think that's great. And I think simultaneously, you need to look at what's under the waterline and be able to address that. For example, children with ADHD many, many times have sensory issues. Okay, they may have sensory issues that could exhibit in children with ADHD diagnosis, Asperger's, autism, or even in a lot of children that don't have a secondary diagnosis. Sensory issues are pretty common nowadays, and it's starting to become more recognizable. So if your child has ADHD and you want to address the behavior, you may want to look at the sensory elements of it. A lot of children with ADHD really, really lack proprioceptive input. Proprioceptive input. That is when your brain is sending out signals and messages to each of your joints, each of your joints here, to try to ask, okay, so where are you? Where are you? Where are you? To try to find out where each, your body awareness, where each part of you is. And many times for some adults and children, it doesn't come back. The message, the signal doesn't come back right away saying, I'm here, for those signals to be registered in the brain. So as a result, your brain is constantly sending out messages saying, okay, so where are you? Where are you? The knee joints, the elbow joints, where are you? And it becomes very, very distracting for a child to be processing that in the back of your brain. So this is why I'm saying that sometimes when our children get diagnosed with these things, and they definitely show the traits, but there could be other reasons behind it as to whether or not those traits are showing. In this case, if you have a child whose brain is constantly trying to send out signals, constantly not getting the signals back from different body parts, and then constantly trying to find out how can they focus and listen in class, it becomes incredibly difficult. So instead of saying, okay, so we can give him medication so he can focus better, which is one way to do it, you can also look at the sensory input to see if we can give him or her some proprioceptive input. So those things, the signals get back, or those inputs get satisfied when you do joint compression. So anything related, anything that compresses any part of your joint will really help. So occupational therapists may have infants or very young children who have sensory issues. Actually, you would actually hold their hand, you will hold their arms, and you will actually literally go and compress their joints for somebody who is young and small and you're trying to give them those inputs. But for somebody who is older, there are activities that they can do all by themselves to give themselves the proprioceptive input. For example, activities that gives you a lot of that: jumping on the trampoline, climbing, heavy work, pushing wheelbarrows or a wagon full of bricks, water jugs, anything that's really, really heavy. If your child is old enough that you can get them onto doing some weight training, like the guys do at the gym, I mean, that would be fantastic, because a lot of that is proprioceptive input. So when you think proprioceptive input, you want to think weight is your friend. Anytime you can put weight on, if your child is going hiking, put a weighted backpack on them. We used to do that with our dog, actually, when he's a tiny little, well, not tiny little, but a very young puppy, a chocolate lab that was very, very hyperactive. So we always take him hiking, but we sometimes will put some weight around him to kind of give him a little more input or give him a little more energy expenditure. You can do that with your child too. When you go hiking, when you climb the stairs, when you go running, whatever it is, add a little extra weight. Any activities that involve weight, it will give you the proprioceptive input. In other words, that compression of the joint. So a lot of children with ADHD that cannot focus, that has a hard time, well, you just need to know before they need to sit down and do a focus activity, you need to have those energy, you need to get those energy out of them, and you need to also give them the right input that they need. So sensory area is one of them. Proprioception isn't just one. I mean, it's only one of the 7 sensory areas. There's also vestibular input, which is the movement, such as swinging activities. There is auditory processing, there's visual processing, there's tactile processing related to what you're touching. So the biggest one here for children with ADHD that you really want to hit would be the proprioception. That means get the joint compression input in before you really need to sit down for an activity. And that is not enough. You need to do it throughout the day, a lot of the times. That's one of them. I once had a psychiatrist say to me that cowboys don't need ADHD medication. Cowboys don't need ADHD medication. I want you to ponder on that for a little bit. Why don't they? Well, cowboys have no need to ever sit down and focus. And their activities for the day is full of joint compression, proprioceptive input, and full of energy expenditure and all of those things that meet their sensory needs. So as a result, they don't need ADHD medication. And for those of you who are really opposed to medication, who really just don't want to go there, I would invite you to ponder on that for a bit and see if you can make your lifestyle, if you can change your lifestyle or change certain environmental factors for your child such that your child could live as close to a cowboy's life as possible. Now, that sounds ridiculous. He needs to go to school, doesn't he? He does need to sit for 7 hours a day, doesn't he? So what I'm trying to say is, can we add in as much of those activities, those physical activities? Can we keep the body moving so much in between your having to sit down portions that you're mimicking very close to a cowboy's life, close enough that your child can try to manage without medication, of course, with all of your additional supports, some other things that I'm going to share with you. So just think about that. If if your child really have to sit all day and not have any opportunities to get the sensory inputs they need, then it really becomes very, very difficult to manage without medication. So that's something you need to consider. What is the lifestyle? Can you add those activities in to help, or can you not? Or should you do a combination of both, adding activities, altering your environment, plus maybe a very light dose of a certain medication that your doctor recommends for you. So number one is sensory, and then there's skills that are missing. A lot of skills, for example, your executive functioning is one of the biggest skills that's missing for children and adults with ADHD. Like I said, task initiation is difficult. Task sustaining of the task is difficult. But the hope is that all of those areas are trainable. Even if your child is already on medication and you absolutely need it in order to manage your child's daily function, you want to still be teaching them those skills. So, for example, sustaining of the task. Again, ahead of time, you need to front load them with all of the sensory inputs that they need. Before you have them sit down to a 20-minute sit down focus activity, they really need to go run outside. They really need to go do something of a physical and preferably heavy work for a good 20, 30 minutes. Could be even 10 depending on your child. And I want to tell you that the sensory cup, you need to keep it filled all day. Okay, if you can keep your sensory cup full for most part of the day by giving them those movements, those input opportunities all throughout the day, then perhaps right before they need to sit down to do something really focused, they could just go and have a little movement for even 5 minutes. You will notice the difference, that they're significantly far more capable of sitting and focusing. But getting back to the skills in terms of executive functioning skills, yes, if you have a problem with sustaining in a task, that's an example of what you can do. Ahead of time, front load them with sensory input, and then you set a timer and you set an agenda for what needs to be accomplished within that short amount of time. This is something you can train up to. Attention span is definitely something you can train up to, and it needs to be timed. You can start from 5 minutes. And then move up to maybe 7 minutes if they do well, move up to 10 minutes. You can slowly build up their attention span to maybe 30 minutes, which is actually as much as an adult can fully focus on. So there are studies that are showing that even for adults without any diagnosis, sometimes after 30 minutes, our brain is kind of getting fatigued and tired, and it cannot continue to execute on the same task with the same amount of productivity and focus and results. So that's the same for children. I mean, think about it. If they can sit down and work for a 30-minute block, that's actually really good. If they can really focus, that's really good. They should get up and they should move around. You shouldn't have them sit for any longer. You should let them move on. In terms of executive functioning skills, I often hear parents complain about their children just really having a scattered brain. It's like they're so smart, they can work their math, they can build their Legos, they can do things at a very high level, they can go through the complex thinking and complex problem solvings, but when it comes to getting their backpack together to go to school, they just can't do it. And there's a lot of anxiety that raised from children for that. And I want to add a success paradigm here for those children. It's very, very common for them to feel a lot of anxiety and be feeling a lot of failure because they can't seem to get their act together. And as a parent, you're so frustrated. You're constantly behind them. You're nagging them. You're trying to, why can't you just do this? This is so easy. All I need is for you to put your dishes away. And now you got your plates and your fork and you miss your cup. And it's so frustrating for the parents. And it's also so frustrating for the child. So I want you to start building a success paradigm. paradigm. In other words, do not ask your child to do something that you know he cannot completely be successful in. So if you tell your child to bring your dishes back, and he brought the plates and the fork, and then he won't bring the cup because he's forgetful, or he just kind of scatterbrained, make a checklist. Make a checklist for him when you give instructions. Also, these children a lot of times have auditory processing difficulties. So if you're giving verbal instructions, get your backpack, get your jammies on, and throw this in the laundry and come meet you in the car, I mean, they're going to lose it. You're going to lose them by the time you give your second instruction. So on the training, on the skills building, you're going to want to start off with a checklist. Write down your item as you give instruction, nice and slow. Write a keyword, jammy, brush, to brush teeth, or dishes. For example, in our family, we have the evening routine of after dinner, everybody has to get about 8 things done. And that's because everybody's a part of the family. Everybody helps. Somebody's doing the trash. Somebody's doing recycle. Somebody's cleaning the table, floor, sweeping, brushing teeth, getting jammies on. So there's a whole lot going on, right? So I write down the list for the child. And then they have something to go by, clip a pen to it, because, believe it or not, if you ask them to go do those things in the house and you send them with their list, they may come back with not knowing where the list is. So do whatever it takes to help your child be successful. And don't laugh at this, but I have once taped a list like that on the child's hand. I have taped it onto their shirt to say, okay, you look up your list, you won't lose it, you come back with me, you come back to me with the list of these things done. And when they come back to you, you're going to celebrate with so much success because you're building their success paradigm. You're trying to shift the, don't you remember I told you this? Don't you remember I told you that? Into building success by giving them a platform where they can be successful. You give them a checklist and they can execute. They can execute on the checklist. They can come back, and slowly you want to remove those support because you want them to learn how to organize themselves. If they start to learn that things of a simple nature, of a daily life nature, is difficult for them, and it will always be difficult for the rest of their lives, they need to start picking up some skills to kind of make up for it. If I always tend to forget to grab my coffee or whatever it is before I go to work, well, I'm going to write down a list, put it next to my car key. And every time before I get into the car, I look at my list next to my car key and I know I'm set for the day. That's something an adult will have to do if you kind of are the kind of person that's forgetful about things. And so that's the kind of thing that you want to teach your child to do. Because at the end of the day, if they are relying on the medication, they're going around scatterbrained. When they don't go on the medication that day, things aren't working. And, it becomes a choice of whether or not you want to slowly build that skill in them and maybe use the medication just as a little patch for the rough period while you're still trying to build their skills, they're still trying to grow up. And hopefully one day they can really successfully manage themselves without having to have the medication. I think that will be the ultimate goal. But these skills you have to start building from the point when they're young. Another question on the topic is, should I tell my child that they have ADHD? I mean, every time people get diagnosis, they always wonder, okay, how do I talk to my child about it? I think it's up to you and your comfort level on whether or not you think you want them to know about it. For my personal opinion, I think you don't want your child to be walking around thinking they've got a label on them. Okay, I've got ADHD, I've got autism, so I can't do anything in life. I mean, you don't want that, but you do want them to know, either your child have diagnosis or not, you do want them to know that there are certain things that are challenging for you. I think you should treat it like normal for everybody. We all have strengths and weaknesses. And this is an area that is weak for you. This is an area that is really challenging for you. So all of us are born with gifts and are born with challenges, things that are difficult for us. You don't want to single them out by saying, oh, you have ADHD, and that means something about you isn't right. You don't want them to feel that way, but you want to give a healthy perspective of, we are all born with gifts and we are all born with challenges, and you do need to know the areas that you are challenged with so that you can find ways to overcome that. And that becomes a big job in your life to overcome that challenge that you are born with. And you're certainly not the only one person who is born with challenges. Some challenges have labels, some don't, but everybody is born with challenges. So you want to let your child know that, it's your comfort level on whether or not you want to tell them you have ADHD, but I think bottom line, you need to tell them, so focusing is very difficult for you. Sitting down for a long time is difficult for you. Managing your daily life are areas that are challenging for you, but here's what we can do to help you grow those skills so it won't be as challenging for you. And other people have other challenges that they need to work on. I'm almost out of time here, but I wanted to share one last strategy, which is having to do with management of their self-regulation. Self-regulation becomes difficult for these children because they're always very anxious. So again, you want to find areas that cause them to be anxious, and you can ahead of time talk to them about, for example, if going to such events is going to be very challenging for them, you want to ahead of time talk to them about the event, what's going to happen there. You want to cover the basis of what they're anxious about. A lot of times the anxiety comes from everything. It feels like everything's just suddenly happening to me. Such as, okay, so I suddenly forgot this, that suddenly came up, and everything just feels like it suddenly came up. So you want to spend a lot of time preparing them ahead of time about what's going to happen. What do you need? What do you need to get ready for? Oh, and here's a checklist of 3 things that you need to get together before this, so you can ease them into any event or into any activities that may cause anxiety for them. There's a lot more that you can do to manage ADHD without medication. And in my book, Outcast to Outstanding, I dedicated a lot of the chapters talking about each of the strategies that you can use to help your child manage these skill deficits, either with or without medication. I hope you have enjoyed our session today. If you have any questions, go ahead and send me an email at Luiza, Luiza, @harmoniousclan.com. Again, I will be here every Friday at 10:30 Mountain Time to share strategies with you and address any questions that's coming to me during the week. And also, if you want to send the questions while we're on live, I can address that immediately too. Have a great weekend.